My female boss harassed me at work and I got fired for speaking up. What happens when the truth becomes too uncomfortable for the world to hear? In this deeply personal and emotionally charged story, a young man, a rising star in a prestigious company, finds himself entangled in a web of silent abuse, manipulation, and power. His boss was admired, respected, untouchable, but behind closed doors the boundaries blurred. When he finally found the courage to speak up, the company didn't protect him. They erased him. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. The words hang in the air like smoke in a locked room. You try to process them, but your ears are ringing. The HR manager doesn't look up. Her voice is flat, procedural, practiced. You stand there with a thin envelope in your hand, your severance, your silence. Outside the glass wall, you see the office where you used to belong. Someone is laughing near the coffee machine. Another is typing fast, pretending not to see you. No one meets your eyes. No one says goodbye. Your box is light, just a few notebooks, a desk plant, and a photo of your team on the last company retreat. You used to smile in that picture. Now, the smile feels like it belonged to someone else, someone who didn't know better. They don't fire you for incompetence. They don't fire you for misconduct. They fire you because you said something, because you named something no one else dared to name. You walk past the security desk. The guard nods, confused. He doesn't know. How could he? You were a rising talent. That's what they called you. High performing, promotable, polished. But now, to them, you're something else. You're a threat. And so, just like that, you're out. It doesn't feel real until you step into the elevator and see your reflection in the mirrored wall. Pale, angry, ashamed, and yet still certain. Because you know what happened. Because you were there. And so was she. People often say, if it really happened, why didn't you speak up sooner? But no one ever asks what it costs to be the first voice. No one tells you how quickly truth turns into noise, how fast a victim becomes a liability, especially when the one who crossed the line holds all the power. She smiled when you started. She praised you in meetings. She touched your arm a second too long. She invited you for mentorship lunches that felt more like dates. And when you hesitated, when you refused to play along, she didn't scream. She didn't threaten. She just smiled a different way. And everything began to change. But you didn't tell anyone. Not at first. Because part of you hoped it would stop. Because part of you didn't want to ruin your chance. And part of you, God help you, wondered if maybe you had done something wrong. Until one day, the line wasn't just crossed. It was erased. And you spoke. You wrote the email. You submitted the report. You did everything by the book. You thought anyone would listen. But what you learned that day is this: when truth walks into a room filled with silence, the silence often wins. Until now. Because now you're going to tell it all. You want to know what really happened. Then listen close. Because this story isn't just mine. It could be yours too. At first it felt flattering. You were young, but not naive. You had worked hard to get there. Weekends in the office. Reports that no one else wanted to touch. Clients that were too difficult, deadlines that were too tight. You took them all. And in return you rose. When she first called your name in the weekly meeting, publicly, confidently, your chest lifted. Let's give credit where credit is due, she said, her eyes holding yours longer than necessary. Everyone clapped. You smiled. You thought it was respect. Maybe in another world it could have been. She was everything people talked about. Smart. Sharp. The youngest VP the company ever had. A woman in a room full of suits, and somehow the room always tilted her way. People admired her. They envied her. They feared her. But you simply worked for her. That was all, until it wasn't. The shift was subtle at first. A late night message after a pitch. Couldn't have done it without you. Drinks next week. You hesitated, then replied, thanks, let's focus on next quarter's launch. You didn't think much of it. But the next week she appeared by your desk. No meeting, no notice, just her leaning over your chair, a hand on your shoulder. We should get dinner sometime, just the two of us, talk about your future. And she smiled again. That same smile from the meeting. Only now it felt different. You told yourself it was just her style. That some people blur lines but don't mean anything by it. That you were reading too much into it. But the messages came more often. The compliments got more personal. Her presence more lingering. And the looks from coworkers, they changed too. Raised eyebrows, quick glances, whispers that stopped when you entered the room. One colleague joked, you've become the favorite. Better hope her husband doesn't find out. You laughed awkwardly, but your gut didn't laugh. It twisted. You started avoiding late meetings. You left the office on time. You stopped replying to texts after 9 p.m., but the avoidance only seemed to feed her attention. It became a game. You tried to be professional. You tried to stay quiet. You tried to believe it would pass, but deep down you felt something no one talks about. That cold burn when boundaries start to bend, when someone holds both your promotion and your peace. She began assigning you to projects that required closed-door collaboration. She'd close the door gently. She'd sit closer. She'd laugh a little too long at your discomfort. You wondered, what would they say if the roles were reversed? If a male boss touched a woman's shoulder that way? If he made comments about her clothes? If he messaged her at midnight saying, "You looked amazing today"? Would the silence still hold? Would anyone laugh? But you weren't a woman, and she wasn't just your boss. She was the one who signed the checks, the one who shaped reputations, and the only thing louder than her attention was the quiet complicity around you. Maybe it's not that bad, you told yourself. Maybe if I just keep working, she'll move on. But what you didn't know was this: she wasn't done, and silence yours theirs was exactly what she counted on. It was supposed to be a strategy session, just you and her reviewing the campaign roadmap. The calendar invite said Q3 creative review. The conference room was dimly lit, too quiet. She locked the door. You heard it, that gentle click meant to be unnoticed, but it rang louder in your chest than anything you could say. She sat across from you at first, a notebook in her lap, a tablet glowing between you. But the conversation drifted, slowly, skillfully, as if by accident. "You know," she said, "I've always admired the way you think. So careful, so disciplined." You gave a polite nod, focused on the bullet points on the screen. "But you don't let people in, do you?" She continued, her voice soft now. "Not really. I think there's more to you than you let anyone see." She stood up, walked behind you. Her hands grazed the back of your chair. You froze, and then her hand on your shoulder. Firm, still. "You don't have to be afraid of me," she whispered. That's when you stood, not abruptly, not angrily, just enough. You took a step back. You said her name, softly, firmly. "This isn't appropriate." Her face didn't change. No shock, no apology, just a smirk. "You're misunderstanding me," she said. "Or maybe you're just not ready for this kind of opportunity." You didn't answer. You opened the door, walked out with your heart pounding and your mind burning. You told yourself to forget it. You told yourself, "She's testing you, she's bluffing, don't escalate." But that night she messaged you again. "You disappointed me today. I thought you were smarter than that." No emojis, no warmth, just a line that felt more like a warning than a message. The next day, your calendar was mysteriously cleared. Projects reassigned. Your Slack access restricted. No more invites. No more meetings. Just silence. You asked your colleagues, "Is something going on?" They avoided your eyes. "I heard you're being moved off the campaign," one finally said. She said you needed a break. A break. You were working 60 hours a week just a month ago. You were up for a promotion. Now you were invisible. The whispers changed too. Not just jokes anymore. Now they came with looks, pity, discomfort, suspicion. Someone said, maybe he wanted the attention, and now he regrets it. You realized something terrifying. She had already told her version of the story, and no one questioned it, because power protects itself, and because you were a man. You sat alone in the stairwell that Friday evening, watching the office empty out. The city glowed behind the windows. Your phone buzzed. A new email from HR. Subject: request for clarification. They were investigating you. This isn't just unfair, you told yourself. This is war. But what you didn't know was that in a war like this, the first casualty is always silence. And you had been silent too long. You didn't sleep that night. The message looped in your head. Her words, her touch, the silence of your team. And that email from HR sitting like a loaded weapon in your inbox. You opened a blank document, not to rage, not to accuse, just to tell the truth. On Thursday, during a scheduled meeting, my manager closed the door and made a series of inappropriate comments and gestures that made me feel uncomfortable and unsafe in my workplace. You rewrote that sentence 4 times, trying to sound professional, neutral, unemotional, as if you could make truth more palatable by softening the pain inside it. You included no accusations, no insults, just details, just facts, just enough to be heard, hopefully. You sent the report to HR. You copied legal. You marked it confidential. And then you waited. 2 days later, they called you in. The room was cold. 2 people sat across from you. a senior HR officer with an expression carved from stone, and a man from compliance who never said a word. They didn't ask how you were. They didn't ask what you needed. They asked, "Do you have proof? Were you alone with her voluntarily? Why didn't you report this earlier? Do you think your performance lately has been consistent with your job description?" You answered, politely, carefully, because every word felt like a thread holding your reputation together. But you saw it. In their eyes, in their notes. You were not a whistleblower. You were a risk. A week passed. No updates, no reply. But something did change. You were taken off all high-visibility projects. Your name was left out of team briefings. Your login failed for a dashboard you built yourself. It was quiet exile. Then came the final meeting. You were called to HR again. This time your manager was there too. She sat across from you, calm, her hands folded like she was attending a budget review. The HR rep read from a paper. "Due to behavioral concerns and a pattern of disruption affecting team cohesion, we are terminating your employment effective immediately." You blinked. That was it. No explanation. No defense. Just a signature and a security escort. She stood as you were let out. No smile. No remorse. Just the faintest nod like someone deleting a file from her desktop. Outside it was raining. Your box got wet. The photo of your team blurred at the corners. People walked past you in the lobby pretending not to know. One colleague paused, opened his mouth, then turned and walked away. You weren't part of the narrative anymore. You were the problem they erased. "I told the truth," you whispered to no one. "I told the truth." But in that moment you understood something terrible. Telling the truth isn't always the hard part. Surviving it is. There's a silence that follows public humiliation. It doesn't scream. It doesn't shout. It just lingers, like a fog in your chest that never quite lifts. You stay home the first week, not because you're avoiding the world, but because you can't bear to meet its eyes. Every cafe feels like a place someone from the office might walk into. Every ping on your phone sounds like judgment. You watch the hours move like molasses. Your inbox is empty except for emails from HR you'll never open again. You wonder if your name is being whispered in the hallways you once walked. If they're saying things like, "Maybe he misunderstood. It's complicated. Why didn't he just leave if it was so bad?" You wonder who still believes you. And the answer cuts deeper than anything. You don't even know if you believe you anymore. People ask if you're okay, but they don't mean it. Not really. They mean, "Are you moving on yet? Are you still talking about it?" One friend suggests maybe it wasn't that serious. Another says, "You're lucky she was attractive." You laugh. You fake it. Because the alternative is too exhausting to explain. You try to update your resume. Try to write team leader, award-winning strategist, cross-functional campaign manager. But the only words that feel true are unemployed, erased, disbelieved. Then one night your phone lights up. An unknown number, a short message. "I read what happened. I believe you. I left last year. I couldn't stay either." You stare at the screen. A name you recognize. Someone who used to sit 3 desks away. Quiet, always polite. She never said much, but she saw everything. And now, for the first time since it all began, someone says, "Me too." That message doesn't fix everything, but it does something else. It plants a seed. Maybe you're not alone. Maybe the system isn't unbreakable. Maybe silence once broken can echo further than you think. You start writing, not to accuse, not to expose, just to feel real again. You open a blank page. You type the first sentence. When your boss crosses a line and no one listens, you start to wonder if the line ever mattered at all. You don't hit publish. Not yet. But for the first time in weeks, your hands don't shake. Loneliness has a desk too, you think. But maybe, just maybe, it's not yours anymore. A year passes. Quietly, unevenly. You take freelance gigs, small projects. You move to a different side of the city. Fewer memories. Less weight. But the story stays with you. Not as a wound anymore. More like a scar. Faded but undeniable. One afternoon, you return to that draft, the one you couldn't finish. You reread every line. The tremble in your first words. The restraint in your tone. The ache between paragraphs. And then you hit publish. You don't expect much. Maybe a few views. A handful of comments. But within a day, the post spreads. It isn't just about her anymore. It's about systems. About culture. About the quiet spaces where power preys on silence. Messages brought in. From men. From women. From interns, consultants, managers. Stories different but hauntingly familiar. This happened to me too. I thought I was crazy. I never said anything. but I wish I had. Your inbox becomes a confession booth, not of shame, but of awakening. A journalist reaches out. She wants to cover your experience. You hesitate. You've already lost enough. But then you remember that stairwell, the wet cardboard box, the pity in their eyes. You say yes. The article goes live. It doesn't name names. It doesn't need to. Because truth, when spoken with clarity, carries its own signature. Soon, the company you once worked for issues a statement, an internal investigation, a promise to review policies and culture. And maybe it's just PR, but it's something. It's movement. You're invited to speak on a podcast, then at a university panel, then a small conference on workplace ethics. People listen now, not because you shout, but because you stayed. You endured, and you spoke. You never went back to the corporate tower. You don't miss it. You built something quieter, something slower, but something yours. A career where respect isn't traded for silence, where performance doesn't come with propositions, where your voice isn't a liability, it's the foundation. And when people ask, would you do it again, knowing how it ended, you pause, because it didn't end. It became something else. You became something else. Just as you finally say, doesn't always wear a suit. It doesn't always sit in a boardroom. Sometimes it sits in someone's living room, watching a video, reading a story, and realizing they're not crazy. They're not alone, and they still have a voice. And if you're that person, if you're listening right now, then maybe justice is already beginning.